Welcome to India Talks. India Talks is an interactive program which features Indians in Indonesia which inspire and tell us something that we can also do, which is interesting. And today we have with us Amol Titus. And it's really a pleasure to have you here, Amol.
Thank you.
Because you have such a multi-dimensional personality, you do so many things, and it's amazing. Every time I meet you, I learn something new, and it's been happening on and off for so many years now, but this is the first opportunity that I have to actually learn more about you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on your show and giving me a chance to talk to your audience. I think we all know that we have a left and a right brain.
Yes.
And I believe that what we can try and do is open the windows of the left brain and the right brain. That part of us which is more rational, which looks at concepts, analysis, looks at structures, as well as our creative side, which looks at curiosity, exploring the themes around us, questioning things, looking at cultures, observing the society over here. So I think it's a mix of the right brain and the left brain, and all I'm trying to do is open as many windows as I can and go on as many journeys as I can.
And I see that in the last so many years, like in the last 5 years, you have been very, very creative. And does this have anything with being in Indonesia?
Well, I started writing from a very young age, from the age of 5 in fact.
Wow,
And,
the children barely learn to read by the time that they are 5.
So I used to scribble poetry and short stories and send them to supplements of newspapers. So the creative aspect was always there. What happens is you try and grow in confidence.
Right.
And like any creative art form, you do what we call in India riyaz, or
Yes.
a kind of devotional
Correct.
practice
Correct.
or rehearsal.
Yes.
And for a writer, I think it requires different aspects. Reading is the first one, so you try and read different books, different subjects, because these will lead on to creative sparks.
I see.
The second is really immersing yourself in the culture of a place. And if you look at Indonesia, one of the things which engages us is tolerance of how people coexist.
Yes. Then there's so much influences, different influences here.
Yes. And I found that coming to Indonesia when I came in '98, the country is rebuilding itself. So there were various ways to contribute to that rebuilding process. One was, from a management side.
Right.
One was as a writer who's observing what's going on. Another one was in terms of developing aspects, sharing,
Right.
Expertise. And on the creative side, what fascinates me is the experimentation which is here, which is going on. It's a democratic experimentation. People are trying to live together. There is much more debate now. So that's something you observe as a writer.
Even when you see those lots of people who are on the road now, earlier people did not even have a voice. Now people suddenly have a voice, the press is freer, and everybody gets their opinion known, which I think is a right step.
Absolutely, and I think India and Indonesia are two great examples of a democratic experiment in diversity. Now India obviously has been a longer democracy, so it has the institutions.
Yeah.
Indonesia has started to develop those institutions. But I think the concept of very, very diverse people in terms of ethnic backgrounds, religions, lifestyles, trying to coexist together is something which is fascinating, and it appeals to me. And whilst I was observing this entire process of change, there was a development in Afghanistan, in Bamiyan,
Yes.
where these famous Buddhist statues were blown up
In 2002.
in 2002, and that was something which sparked my questioning as to, just like you have the Borobudur temple,
Right.
these are also not just monuments, I think they are observing the passage of history. So I tried to place myself in the minds of these two statues and try and construct a dialogue through which they were observing what was going on.
In fact, that's a very interesting point you just raised, Amol, about observing. And I could never earlier understand why we had these huge, gigantic statues, but now that you say it, it seems like, oh yes, that's why they are there looking from above and just observing. I think that's a very valid point.
Yes. So this book really looked at a dialogue, just like we are talking,
right,
of two friends. And in Afghan legend, they had actual names called Sol and Shah Mama. So they were talking, and so this book developed. And I developed this theme further in my next book, which was a dialogue between mountain ranges. Because I was wondering, there are lots of summits which take place in Switzerland. And if the mountains were to meet, what would they talk about? So this was a different creative approach at the subject.
We would love to hear something which you have from your books, and we would do that right after this break. And before we go to the break, I'd like to say that this interesting program is brought to you by Q Channel, the channel for decision makers, and sponsored by Indoindians.com. It is your Indian channel for Indonesia. In fact, Indo-Indians is now partnering with India Say. India Say is a magazine which is published in Singapore, and it features great columnists like Mahesh Bhatt, Shobha Day, and a host of others. And soon I think Amol will be joining in one of them in India Say. And if you'd like to subscribe to these magazines, you can always write to us at Indoindians.com. In fact, if you go there, you will see a big banner there saying subscribe.
A short poem. But as I developed it, I found that the context was, they were Buddhist statues. So I thought there are certain aspects of Buddhism which are relevant in today's world. For example, uncertainty, right? And we see it in Indonesia, where life is going on, but suddenly there is an uncertain event like an earthquake or a tsunami. So uncertainty is one aspect in Buddhist philosophy, where Prince Gautama suddenly one day decides to abandon a very happy family, and he just gives up everything, his kingdom. So that's how this poem got longer and evolved into an epic, because it started to blend in certain tenets of Buddhism, looking at uncertainty, looking at anger, looking at ritualism, and so on.
Can you read something that you really like? Can you read for our audience something from your book?
Okay, let me just show you the cover. This is what these statues were. Of course, they are no longer there. And I've actually made all the sketches because I found that the sketches were one way of looking at the same subject, but from a different creative angle.
So it's ink to paper, but in a different form.
Yes. I'll read to you from the introduction of the book, which is putting the context of these two statues as friends and observers. Blending with the barren, symbols of a quest, rooted in posture, yet freely careening in thought, unaffected by the scourge of vandal or pest, a landmark presence through collapse and rot, weathering pelting rain and bellowing storm, burning heat